Greetings. This is Brother Eli with another episode of Bible Truth Revealed. Today's topic is, was Ruth really an Israelite? Was Ruth really an Israelite? We will explore the book of Ruth to determine whether she was an ethnic Moabite, meaning a bloodline descendant of Moab, or an ethnic Israelite, meaning a bloodline descendant of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Many people are faced with a dilemma when trying to decide whether Ruth was an ethnic Moabite or an ethnic Israelite. There are a number of reasons for this. Firstly, there are Israelite men who want Ruth to be an ethnic Moabite because it gives them an excuse to go a-whoring after non-Israelite women. Secondly, most Christians want Ruth to be an ethnic Moabite to give the impression that the Most High God of Israel loves and accepts everybody, regardless of their ethnicity. Thirdly, the ethnicity of Ruth is not immediately clear when reading the book of Ruth. As such, it requires careful study of the Hebrew Scriptures or Old Testament to determine her ethnicity. Furthermore, some teachings on this subject are quite complicated, so even after listening and reading, many people are still confused. In my research, I came across an article entitled, Was Ruth a Moabite or an Israelite? This can be seen on bbcpo.com, which is the website of Bible Baptist Church. The article presents both views in a way that is straightforward and easy to understand. As such, I will quote extensively from this article in today's teaching. However, every quote will be carefully checked and either substantiated with or refuted by the Hebrew Scriptures so that we can finally determine Ruth's true ethnicity. So under the heading, was Ruth a Moabite or an Israelite? That's on the article on bbcpo.com. Quote 1 says this. There are two views of interpretation that are commonly held in resolving the seeming problem of Ruth's heritage. The first view is that Ruth was an Israelite that lived in Moab. She was not a Moabite ethnically. It was the land of her inheritance. So this argument is saying that Ruth was a bloodline descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just like the rest of the Israelites. It just so happens that she lived in the land of Moab. She was not an ethnic Moabite. The central argument to support this claim is that Moses conquered the plains of Moab. So the idea is Moses conquered the plains of Moab, and the Israelites lived in the plains of Moab, so that Ruth was one of those Israelites who descended from those who conquered the plains of Moab. Deuteronomy chapter 29, I will read verses 1 to 2 and verses 7 to 8. That's Deuteronomy chapter 29, verses 1 to 2 and verses 7 to 8. I will be reading from the Brenton Septuagint translation. It reads thus. These are the words of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab. So the Most High gave the words of the covenant to Moses in the land of Moab, besides the covenant which he made with them in Choreb. So apart from the 10 Commandments, which the Israelites got at Choreb, they also got another covenant in the land of Moab. Verse 2. And Moses called all the sons of Israel and said to them, Ye have seen all things that the Lord did in the land of Egypt before you to Pharaoh and his servants and all his land. Verse 7. And ye came as far as this place. This place is the land of Moab, because he's standing in the land of Moab speaking these words. It continues. And there came forth Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, to meet us in war. Verse 8. And we smote them and took their land. This is how Moses conquered the land of Moab. And it continues. And I gave it for an inheritance to Reuben and Gad and to the half tribe of Manasseh. So this is the reason why the first view states that Ruth was an Israelite that lived in the land of Moab. The quote continues. The children of Israel began their conquest into the promised land by defeating Sihon, the Ammonite king of Heshbon. That's what we just read in Deuteronomy chapter 29. The region of Heshbon included the plains of Moab on the northeastern coast of the Dead Sea and Jordan River. Numbers chapter 21, verses 25 to 26, and verses 31 to 35. Numbers chapter 21, verses 25 to 26, and verses 31 to 35 reads thus. And Israel took all their cities, and Israel dwelt in all the cities of the Amorites in Heshbon, and in all cities belonging to it. Verse 26. For Heshbon is the city of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and he before fought against the king of Moab, and they took all his land, from Aroah to Arnon. So we read earlier in Deuteronomy chapter 29 that Moses took the land of Moab from Sihon, the king of Heshbon. Now we are learning that that king had taken it from the king of Moab. So notice, it was taken from the king of Moab. It was owned by the Amorites, yet it retained the name of Moab. Then Moses took it from the Amorites, and it retained the name of Moab. The name did not change. It belonged to the Moabites, then it belonged to the Amorites, and finally it belonged to the Israelites. Verse 31, and Israel dwelt in all the cities of the Amorites. This is referring to the land of Moab from Aroah to Arnon. That's above the Arnon River. Verse 32, and Moses sent to spy out Jazer, and they took it, and its villages, and cast out the Amorite that dwelt there. And having returned, they went up the road that leads to Bashan, and Og the king of Bashan went forth to meet him, and all his people to war to Edraim. Verse 34, and the Lord said to Moses, fear him not, for I have delivered him and all his people, and all his land into thy hands. And thou shalt do to him as thou didst to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon. And he smote him and his sons and all his people. And he left none of his to be taken alive. They killed everybody, and they inherited his land. This is how the Israelites came to inherit the land of Moab, and this was given to Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 31 to 34. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 31 to 34 reads thus. And the Lord said to me, Behold, I have begun to deliver before thee Sihon the king of Heshbon, the Amorite, and his land, and do thou begin to inherit his land. This is how the Israelites inherited the land of Moab. Verse 32. And Sihon the king of Heshbon came forth to meet us, he and all his people to war at Jazer. And the Lord our God delivered him before our face, and we smote him and his sons and all his people. We have heard again and again and again how the Israelites killed everybody. They left no one alive. In that land that was taken from the king of Moab, then taken from the Amorites, which still retained its name, the land of Moab, the Israelites killed everybody. Verse 34, and we took possession of all his cities at that time, and we utterly destroyed every city in succession, and their wives and their children. We left no living prey. Nobody was left alive. They were all put to death, bar none. Now remember, the land was taken from the Moabites. It was taken by the Amorites. The Israelites took it from the Amorites, not from the Moabites. But let's read the rest of the quote and hear what it says. Again, the Israelites did not take the land of Moab from the Moabites. They took it from the Amorites, who had previously taken it from the Moabites. The quote continues. It was utterly destroyed, driving out the Moabites. Driving out the Moabites. The people that inhabited the land of Moab were called Moabites. When the land changed ownership, the people took on the name of the land. These Amorites are being referred to as Moabites because they lived in the land of Moab. Regardless of one's ethnicity, if that person lived in the land of Moab, they were called a Moabite. After the Israelites conquered the land of Moab, any Israelite living in the land of Moab could legitimately be called a Moabite because he was a citizen of the land of Moab. Just like today, there are Israelites living in foreign lands. We've been scattered all around the world. We are citizens of those lands, and we are called by the names of those lands. An Israelite who was born and raised in America is called an American. An Israelite born and raised in Britain is called British. An Israelite born and raised in Jamaica is called Jamaican, and so forth. An Israelite born and raised in the land of Moab is called a Moabite. However, they are still ethnic Israelites. They're from the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're simply citizens of the countries where they were born and raised. This is why Ruth was called a Moabitess in the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verse 22, chapter 2, verse 2, and chapter 4, verses 5 and 10. She was a female citizen of the land of Moab. Quote number 2 says, the plains of Moab and Ammon were an inheritance and land of dwelling to 3 tribes of Israel. We have read that before. It is important to realize that not all 12 tribes of Israel settled in the land of Canaan. The tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh settled in the land of Moab. The quote continues, therefore, According to this view, it is highly likely that Ruth was an Israelite of one of these tribes. This is how we determine the ethnicity of Ruth. Now let's turn to the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1, I will read verses 1 and 4. That's Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 and 4. And it came to pass, when the judges ruled, that there was a famine in the land. And the man went from Bethlehem, Judah, to sojourn in the land of Moab. This is the same land of Moab where Moses gave the covenant to the Israelites. This is the same land of Moab that was taken from the Amorites, who took it from the Moabites. This is the same land of Moab where the Israelites dwelled. Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. This is the land of Moab, where the Israelites were called Moabites. It continues. He and his wife and his 2 sons. Verse 4. And they took to themselves wives, women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the second, Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. So these Israelite men went to the land of Moab, where Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh resided. They went to that land because there was a famine in Bethlehem, Judah. Naturally, they're going to go where other Israelites are, but where the famine has not reached. They went to their brethren in the land of Moab, and they married women in that land, Israelite women called Orpah and Ruth. Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 to 2. Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 to 2 speaks about Israelites going after bloodline descendants of Moab, going after ethnic Moabites. So this is going to show a difference between what happened in the book of Ruth chapter 1 and what the Most High said that Israelites must never do. Numbers 25 verses 1 to 2 reads thus. And Israel sojourned in Satin, and the people profaned itself, which means they committed profanities, abomination. They did something that is disgusting and repulsive in the eyes of the Most High God. Let's see what that is. By going a-whoring, they committed whoredoms after the daughters of Moab. Why the daughters of Moab? Why not women of Moab? Because this is talking about bloodline descendants of Moab. These are not just women living in the land of Moab. These are actual ethnic Moabites that Israelites are not supposed to get married to. That's the reason it says they profaned themselves and they went a-whoring after the daughters of Moab. Now, verse 2 tells us what happened after the Israelites profaned themselves by committing this abominable act, and they called them to the sacrifices of their idols. So their wives are the ones who took them to sacrifice to idols, and the people ate of their sacrifices and worshipped their idols. Israelites are not supposed to marry the daughters of Moab, bloodline descendants of Moab. Ruth was never referred to as a daughter of Moab. This is because Ruth was not a daughter of Moab. She was not a bloodline descendant of Moab. She was not an ethnic Moabite. It would have been whoredom for the sons of Elimelech to marry daughters of Moab. It also would have been whoredom for Boaz, a righteous Israelite, to marry Ruth if she was indeed an ethnic Moabite. However, it was perfectly fine to marry Israelite women who were born and raised in the land of Moab. And this is exactly what they did. Quote number 3 from the article says, the second view is that Ruth was a Moabite ethnically, but she was a Jewish proselyte. That is to say, she was converted from the idolatry of the Moabites and faithfully served the Lord God of Israel. Now, some people think this because they want it to be true, and others may turn to Ruth chapter 2 verse 12 in order to support that opinion. So let's have a look at Ruth chapter 2 verse 12 and see whether it tells us that Ruth was an ethnic Moabite who converted from the idolatry of the Moabites to serve the Lord God of Israel. Ruth chapter 2 verse 12 reads thus, the Lord recompense thy work. May a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, to whom thou hast come to trust under his wings. This is a statement that was made by Boaz to Ruth. People read this and say, look, she was a Moabite. There's nothing in this statement that says that Ruth was an ethnic Moabite. This verse tells us absolutely nothing about Ruth's ethnicity. There are many Israelites, even today, who once did not trust the Most High. That does not mean that they were not Israelites. During the time of the judges, when Ruth lived, there was a lot of unrighteousness among the Israelites. This means that some of them did not trust the Most High. Let's read about that in Judges chapter 17, verse 6. Judges chapter 17, verse 6 says, and in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. This confirms that there were many Israelites who did not trust the Most High God of Israel. They did that which was right in their own eyes. If at any point those Israelites repented, it could rightly be said to them, may a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, to whom thou hast come to trust under his wings. These are the words that were said to Ruth. This has absolutely nothing to do with a person's ethnicity. It doesn't tell you that someone was from the bloodline of Moab. It simply tells you there was a time when they did not trust the Most High. Just like there was a time when I did not trust the Most High God of Israel. There was a time when many of my listeners did not trust the Most High God of Israel. But that has no bearing on our ethnicity as such. Ruth chapter 2 verse 12 does not tell us that Ruth was an ethnic Moabite. So we've just disproved quote number 3 from the Bible Baptist Church. Quote number 4 says, while the first view is convincing, let me just read that again. The first view is convincing. Convincing. That means the first view is substantially supported by the evidence. The Hebrew scriptures back up and demonstrate that the first view is correct. It continues. The traditional view of the second position. The what? The traditional view. So now this is a Christian story. The traditional view of the second position is more consistent with the Mosaic law and the fundamental message of Scripture. So this is saying that the view that Ruth was an ethnic Moabite is more supported by the law of Moses, the Mosaic law, and the fundamental message of Scripture. We read earlier from the Hebrew Scriptures where it showed that an Israelite man marrying a daughter of Moab, which is an ethnic Moabite, is profanity and it is whoredom. It displeases the Most High. So we know for a fact that the traditional view is not consistent with the fundamental message of the Hebrew scriptures. Now let's see if it is consistent with the Mosaic law. Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 1 to 3. Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 1 to 3 reads thus. In that day, they read in the book of Moses. So this is a Mosaic law that the people read. And we're going to find out whether the Mosaic law supports the idea that an Israelite can lawfully marry a daughter of Moab, an ethnic Moabite. So again, in that day they read in the book of Moses in the ears of the people, and it was found written in it, this was written in the Mosaic law, that the Ammonites and Moabites should not enter into the congregation of God forever. This is talking about the ethnic Moabites, which includes the daughters of Moab. And the context is going to confirm that. Verse 2, because they met not the children of Israel. So this tells us that the Moabites we're reading about in verse 1 does not include the Israelites who live in the land of Moab. So we have the Moabites who did not meet the children of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. But our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now let's see how the people of Israel, the children of Israel, the bloodline descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob responded when they read in the Mosaic law that the Moabites, the bloodline descendants of Moab, should not enter into the congregation of God forever. Verse 3, and it came to pass when they heard the law, that's the Mosaic law, that they were separated. They separated from these Moabites, even every alien in Israel, because those Ammonites and Moabites should not have been in the congregation of God. The people learned the law, the Mosaic law, and they separated from those ethnic Moabites, which means that quote 4 from Bible Baptist Church has been refuted. The arguments for Ruth being an ethnic Moabite are not consistent with the Mosaic law or the Hebrew scriptures. However, the arguments for Ruth being an ethnic Israelite who lived in the land of Moab, and as such was called a Moabite or Moabitess, are substantiated by the Hebrew scriptures. Now that we know that Ruth was an ethnic Israelite who was born and raised in the land of Moab, let's consider the objections that are usually raised by those who prefer her to be an ethnic Moabite. Objection number 1. Why did Ruth say, "Your people shall be my people"? So why did Ruth say to Naomi, "Your people shall be my people"? Let's read from Ruth chapter 1, verses 8 to 10 and verses 14 to 18. That's Ruth chapter 1, verses 8 to 10 and verses 14 to 18. It reads thus. And Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go now, return each to the house of her mother. The Lord deal mercifully with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me." Verse 9. "The Lord grant you that ye may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." And she kissed them. And they lifted up their voice and wept. And verse 10. And they said to her, "We will return with thee to thy people." So there are many who claim that because they said, "We'll return with thee to thy people," this means a different ethnicity. We're going to join those ethnic Israelites because we're not ethnic Israelites. That's called reading into the scriptures. Let's keep reading. Verse 14. And they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and returned to her people. But Ruth followed her. Verse 15. And Naomi said to Ruth, Behold, thy sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. Turn now thou also after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, so don't make me leave you, or to return from following thee. For whithersoever thou goest, I will go, and wheresoever thou lodgest, I will lodge. Wherever you go, Naomi, I'm coming with you. You're not going to get rid of me. That's what Ruth is saying to Naomi. It continues, Thy people shall be my people, and thy God, my God. And wherever thou diest, I will die. You're not going to get rid of me, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also if I leave thee. For death only shall divide between me and thee. So she's constantly repeating, I am not going to leave you. She said it in different ways. Your people will be my people. Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. I am not going to leave you. Verse 18, and Naomi, seeing that she was determined to go with her, ceased to speak to her anymore. The term thy people simply means the people that you live or associate with. So in other words, wherever you are, Naomi, I'm coming. So those people that you live with, I'm going to join those people because you're not going to get rid of me. Where you die, I'm going to die with you among those people. I'm not going anywhere. So thy people and my people does not suggest two different ethnicities. It's simply saying the people that you are with are the people I'm going to be with. I'm going to leave my homeland. I'm going to leave my people, the people I was born and raised with, to be with your people in your homeland where you were born and raised. This is why in verse 8, Ruth specifically said, return each to the house of her mother. That means go back to where you were born and raised, because those are your people. This has nothing to do with ethnicity. Let's look at another example in the Hebrew scriptures to demonstrate that people who share the same ethnicity can be divided based on who they hang with, based on who they're associated with. I can be an Israelite and have my people that I live with, that I spend time with. You can be an Israelite and you live with and spend time with another set of people. But we're all Israelites. The word my people and the word your people does not suggest that we have different ethnicities. 2 Kings chapter 1, verses 1 to 2. Verse 13 and verse 15. That's 2 Kings chapter 1, verses 1 to 2, verse 13 and verse 15 in the Brenton Septuagint translation. And you'll find those in 2 Samuel chapter 1 in the KJV. It reads us, And it came to pass after Saul was dead, that David returned from smiting Amalek, and David abode 2 days in Ziklag. And it came to pass on the 3rd day, that behold, a man came from the camp, from the people of Saul. So Saul had his people, and these people were not David's people. Saul and David were both Israelites, but they had their own people. Just like Ruth and Naomi were Israelites, but they had their own people. It continues, and his garments were rent, and the earth was upon his head. And it came to pass, when he went in to David, that he fell upon the earth and did obeisance to him. So this man who came from the people of Saul came with a message to King David. Verse 13. And David said to the young man who brought the tidings to him, Whence art thou? So where are you from? And he said, I am the son of an Amalekite sojourner. So this man was the son of an Amalekite that was sojourning with Israel. He was staying with Israel. Yet this man, not being an Israelite, was of the people of Saul. The word people in these contexts has nothing to do with your ethnicity. It's just the people you live with, you're raised with, you spend time with. Those are your people. Verse 15. And David called one of his young men. So David called one of his people, who was not one of Saul's people, and said, Go and fall upon him. And he smote him, and he died. So when Ruth and Naomi spoke about their people, there's nothing in the context that suggests they were talking about ethnicity. Ruth is still an Israelite. Objection number 2. Why did Ruth say, Your God shall be my God? Ruth chapter 1 verses 15 to 18, that's Ruth chapter 1 verses 15 to 18, reads thus. And Naomi said to Ruth, Behold, thy sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. Turn now thou also after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following thee. For whithersoever thou goest, I will go, and wheresoever thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Now, we've explained this before, that the context of this passage is Ruth is saying to Naomi, I am not going to leave you. Wherever you go, I will go. Verse 17, And wherever thou diest, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if I leave thee, for death only shall divide between me and thee. Verse 18, And Naomi, seeing that she was determined to go with her, ceased to speak to her anymore. So again, the context of this passage is that Ruth would follow Naomi wherever she went. Naomi was not encouraging Ruth to worship false gods. She was urging her to go back to her people, the people she was born and raised with. The gods that are being referred to are part of that people. Psalm chapter 95 verse 5 in the Brenton Septuagint translation is Psalm chapter 96 verse 5 in the KJV. That's Psalm 95 verse 5 in the Brenton Septuagint translation, which is Psalm 96 verse 5 in the KJV. It reads thus, For all the gods of the heathen are devils, but the Lord made the heavens. Those people who think that Ruth was an ethnic Moabite would have to admit that this is saying that the gods of the ethnic Moabites, which are part of the heathen, are devils. For all the gods of the heathen are devils. If you believe that Naomi was telling Ruth to go back to her devils, to worship her devils, this makes Naomi a wicked woman. Why? Because a righteous Israelite would not tell someone to go and worship a God other than the Most High God, regardless of their ethnicity. The key to understanding this passage is to recognize that the word gods has multiple meanings. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 22, verse 28, so I can demonstrate another meaning of the word gods. Exodus chapter 22 verse 28 reads thus, Thou shalt not revile the gods, nor speak ill of the ruler of thy people. Now, let's imagine, first of all, that this gods was talking about the same gods of the heathen, which are devils that we read about in Psalm 95, verse 5. This then would be saying that we should not hate the devils. Why would the Most High tell us not to hate the devils that are deceiving the heathen? That would not make sense. But this is telling us not to hate a particular group of people. And it's the same particular group of people that Naomi was telling Ruth to go back to. Now, to get the understanding of who these people were, let's go to Psalm chapter 81. Psalm chapter 81, verses 1 to 4 in the Brenton Septuagint translation, is Psalm chapter 82 in the KJV. So that's Psalm chapter 81, verses 1 to 4, and this will explain to us which gods we must not revile, which gods we must not hate, which gods Naomi told Ruth to go back to. And these gods are part of the people. Verse 1, God stands in the assembly of gods, and in the midst of them will judge gods. Verse 2, how long will he judge unrighteously? So these gods are a group of people that are judging, and the Most High is asking them, how long will he judge unrighteously, which means not according to the law, and accept the persons of sinners? Verse 3, judge the orphan and poor. The Most High is telling these gods that they have to judge righteously, judge the orphan and poor, do justice to the low and needy. He's not talking to devils and telling devils to judge the orphan and poor. He's not telling devils to do justice to the low and needy. Devils don't do justice to anybody. That's why they're called devils. Verse 4, rescue the needy and deliver the poor out of the hand of the sinner. This is how you judge the orphan and poor. You rescue them. You deliver them out of the hands of ungodly people, out of the hands of the unrighteous. Why? These gods are judges. The judges are referred to as gods in the scriptures. It's the judges of Israel that we are not supposed to revile. We're not supposed to hate. We're not supposed to speak evil of the judges of our people. And it's these same judges that Naomi told Ruth to go back to because they were part of the people. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 18 to 19. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 18 to 19 reads thus, thou shalt make for thyself judges and officers in thy cities, which the Lord thy God gives thee in thy tribes. So every tribe is supposed to have its judge. And they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. This is what these gods or judges are supposed to do. And that's why the Most High said to these gods or judges in Psalm 81, judge the orphan and poor. These gods were judges. These judges were gods. It's the same thing. Verse 19, they shall not wrest judgment. That means they shall not judge unrighteously, nor favor persons' means, and accept the persons of sinners. If you line up Psalm 81 and Deuteronomy 16, you will see they're talking about the same people. Nor receive a gift, for gifts blind the eyes of the wise and pervert the words of the righteous. So the gods that we are not supposed to hate, the gods that Ruth was being told to go back to, are the judges. Which judges? The judges of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, because these were the ones that dwelt in the land of Moab. Let's remember that Ruth chapter 1 verse 1 begins, and it came to pass when the judges ruled. These are the judges that Naomi told Ruth and Orpah to go back to. The tribe of Judah, where Naomi came from, also had its own judge. This is what Ruth was talking about when she said, "Your God, your judge will be my God," because it was the judges that were ruling over the tribes. So again, the context of Ruth chapter 1 is not to worship false gods, but rather Ruth was saying to Naomi, wherever you go, I will go. So you go to those people, I'm coming. You're going to be in that tribe, that's where I'm going to be. So that's your judge, your God. Well, that's where I'm going to be because I'm not going to leave you until the day one of us dies. So we can see that Ruth is still an Israelite. The question could be asked, why is it that in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, Ruth said to Naomi, "Thy God," capital G, "my God," capital G. Is that not referring to the Most High God? We have just established from the context that the God that's being referred to is a judge. The people that translated the Hebrew scriptures to the English language were not Israelites. These were the people that enslaved the Israelites, our oppressors from other nations. All they needed to do was change the letter to a capital G to give the impression that it's talking about the Most High God. But it is the context that tells us, righteous Israelites, that this is not talking about the Most High God. It is talking about the judge of the tribe of Judah. Psalm 147, verses 19 to 20, explains why we cannot trust our slave masters to determine whether they should be a capital G or a common G. They do not have the understanding of the scriptures. Psalm 147 verses 19 to 20 reads thus: He sends his word to Jacob. So the Most High God sends his word to Jacob, also known as Israel, the children of Israel. His ordinances and judgments to Israel. Verse 20, he has not done so to any other nation. They do not have the understanding of the Hebrew scriptures. Therefore, they have translated and put capital letters in order to push their own agenda. And in this case, their agenda is to make Ruth the Israelite into Ruth the ethnic Moabite. It continues, and he has not shown them his judgments. Objection number 3. Why did Ruth say that she was a stranger? Why did Ruth say that she was a stranger? The Cambridge Dictionary defines the word stranger in this way: a stranger in a particular place is someone who has never been there before. Now we know that Ruth was in a place that she had never been before, and she made a statement in that particular place that she's a stranger, which means I'm someone who has not been here before. This says nothing about her ethnicity. Let's go to Ruth chapter 2, verses 4 to 6 and verses 10 to 11, and see whether this understanding is consistent with the context. Ruth chapter 2, verses 4 to 6 and verses 10 to 11. It reads thus: And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they said to him, The Lord bless you. And Boaz said to his servant who was set over the reapers, Whose is this damsel? In other words, who's this young lady? Verse 6. And his servant who was set over the reapers answered and said, It is a Moabitish damsel who returned with Naomi out of the land of Moab. Verse 10. And she fell upon her face, and did reverence to the ground, and said to him, How is it that I have found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take notice of me, whereas I am a stranger? I'm not from here. I have never been here before. I'm a stranger to this place, yet you've taken notice of me. Why is that? Verse 11. And Boaz answered and said to her, It has fully been told me how thou hast dealt with thy mother-in-law after the death of thy husband. So yes, even though you are a stranger here, I have inquired about you, and I have been brought up to date. I am fully informed about the way you treated your mother-in-law after your husband passed away, and how thou didst leave thy father and thy mother, and the land of thy birth, and camest to a people whom thou knewest not before. If someone from a different land leave their father and mother, leave the land of their birth, and they go to a second land, to a people they didn't know before, that person is a stranger. But this tells us nothing about that person's ethnicity. This does not demonstrate that Ruth was an ethnic Moabite, which means that Ruth is still an Israelite. Objection number 4. How could Boaz buy Ruth if she was really an Israelite? Numbers chapter 27 verses 7 to 11 give us the law of redemption. That's Numbers chapter 27 verses 7 to 11. And it reads thus. And thou shalt speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a man die and have no son, ye shall assign his inheritance to his daughter. That means give his things to his daughter. Whatever he's left behind, give them to his daughter. Verse 9. And if he have no daughter, ye shall give, that's assign, same thing, his inheritance to his brother. And if he have no brethren, ye shall give his inheritance to his father's brother. 11. And if there be no brethren of his father, ye shall give the inheritance to his nearest relation of his tribe to inherit his possessions. So notice this is not being exchanged for money. It is being given or assigned to the next of kin, to the person that has the right of redemption. And this shall be to the children of Israel an ordinance of judgment, as the Lord commanded Moses. To be perfectly clear, there are some types of redemption that require money, the exchange of funds. But this redemption that we are talking about, which happened in the book of Ruth, did not require the exchange of funds. This redemption is the one that is described in Numbers chapter 27. So this person is supposed to inherit or get these possessions. Ecclesiasticus chapter 36 verse 24. I will read this because Boaz said that he bought Ruth as his wife. So Ecclesiasticus chapter 36 verse 24 says, He that getteth a wife beginneth a possession. So this is how Ruth became Boaz's possession. He got her as a wife, a help like unto himself, and a pillar of rest. So Boaz inherited Ruth along with all the other possessions of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. Ruth was assigned to Boaz along with all their possessions. Ruth was given to Boaz along with all their possessions. Boaz did not pay to get Ruth. She was given to him. She was assigned to him. He inherited her along with all the other possessions of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon according to the law of redemption. He simply redeemed all their possessions. The words redeem and buy are synonymous. Upon close inspection of Ruth chapter 4, it becomes clear that the words redeem and buy are being used interchangeably. This means that when Boaz said that he bought Ruth to be his wife, he was simply saying that he redeemed her. In other words, he got her as a possession. So now we understand the way that redemption works. Let's look at Ruth chapter 4, verses 3 to 10, to get the understanding of how Boaz could buy Ruth even though she was an Israelite. Ruth chapter 4, verses 3 to 10 reads thus: And Boaz said to the relative, The matter regards the portion of the field which was our brother Elimelech's, which was given to Naomi, now returning out of the land of Moab. And I said, I will inform thee, saying, Buy it. That means redeem it, because the words buy and redeem are used interchangeably. They are synonyms. Buy it before those that sit, and before the elders of my people. If thou wilt redeem it, if thou wilt buy it, redeem it. Buy it. The words are being used interchangeably because they mean the same thing. But we know it does not include the exchange of money because we understand the law of redemption with regards to getting someone's possessions when that person passes away. This man that Boaz was speaking to had the right of redemption. He was the next of kin to whom the inheritance should be assigned or given without money. But if thou wilt not redeem it, tell me, and I shall know, for there is no one beside thee to do the office of a kinsman, which is to redeem the inheritance, and I am after thee. And he said, I am here. I will redeem it. I will buy it. Verse 5. And Boaz said, In the day of thy buying the field of the hand of Naomi and of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased. In other words, in the day that you redeem these possessions, thou must also buy her. Thou must also redeem her. Thou must also inherit her as a possession. He that getteth a wife beginneth a possession, so as to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Verse 6, And the kinsman said, I shall not be able to redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. Do thou redeem my right for thyself, for I shall not be able to redeem it. Now, this man could have easily said, There's no way I'm taking a daughter of Moab, because that's profanity, it's an abomination, and I will not go a whoring after the daughter of Moab like the sons of Elimelech did. But because Ruth was not a daughter of Moab, there's no mention of her ethnicity. When Israelites are speaking to Israelites about Israelites, and everybody knows that we are talking about Israelites, there's no need to mention ethnicity. And that's the reason that is not mentioned in Ruth chapter 4. Verse 7. And this was in former time the ordinance in Israel for redemption, and for a bargain, to confirm every word. A man loosed his shoe and gave it to his neighbor, that redeemed his right. He bought his right. And this was a testimony in Israel. Verse 8, And the kinsman said to Boaz, Buy my right for thyself. That means redeem my right for thyself. You can inherit all these things that I was supposed to inherit. And he took off his shoe and gave it to him. Verse 9, And Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, Ye are this day witnesses, that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, meaning I have inherited, I have redeemed it. It has been assigned to me. It has been given to me without money. and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon of the hand of Naomi. Verse 10. Moreover, I have bought for myself for a wife, Ruth the Moabitess. Again, it means I have been given for a wife. I have been assigned. I have redeemed for myself Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. So the name of the dead shall not be destroyed from among his brethren, and from the tribe of his people. Ye are this day witnesses. So we see it is perfectly fine to redeem, which is also called buy, an Israelite woman to be your wife. So the fact that Boaz redeemed or bought Ruth to be his wife does not suggest that she was not an Israelite. The confusion is caused by the word buy and the fact that we use that word differently today. But the word buy is used interchangeably with redeemed and does not suggest that money has exchanged hands. Therefore, Ruth is still an Israelite. The final objection, number 5, is why would Ruth's baby given to Naomi if Ruth was indeed an Israelite? Why was Ruth's baby given to Naomi if Ruth was an Israelite? Ruth chapter 4 verses 13 to 17. Ruth chapter 4 verses 13 to 17 reads thus. And Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Verse 14. And the woman said to Naomi, Blessed is the Lord, who has not suffered a redeemer to fail thee this day, even to make thy name famous in Israel. And he shall be to thee a restorer of thy soul, and one to cherish thy old age. For thy daughter-in-law, which thou hast loved, who is better to thee than 7 sons, has borne him. Verse 16. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom, and became a nurse to it. Now, the scripture does not say that Naomi became the baby's only nurse. A nurse is a caretaker, someone who looks after someone else. If Naomi raised the baby on her own, it would have said she became his nurse, full stop. Meaning she's the only nurse, the only caretaker. Instead, it says she became a nurse to it. The presence of the word a indicates that Naomi was one of multiple nurses or caretaker. This means that the baby had more than one nurse or caretaker. More than one person looked after the baby. Naturally, Naomi would be a nurse or caretaker to the baby because she was his grandmother. But his own mother would also be a nurse or caretaker for him. There's nothing in the context of this passage that suggests that Naomi raised the baby on her own. To suggest otherwise is to add to the text. And the neighbors gave it a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. This is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So why would they say a son has been born to Naomi? Let's go back to chapter 1, verses 19 to 21. Ruth chapter 1, verses 19 to 21 reads thus. And they went both of them until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass when they arrived at Bethlehem that all the city rang with them. And they said, Is this Naomi? And she said to them, Nay, do not call me Naomi, call me bitter. For the mighty one has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. She went out full. She had 2 sons. She was blessed, and she's come back empty. And why call ye me Naomi? Whereas the Lord has humbled me, and the mighty one has afflicted me. She went out full, she came in empty. So now in Ruth chapter 4 verse 17, where we learn that she has received a grandson, where her daughter-in-law has born a son, and this child is supposed to be a restorer of Naomi's soul, it says, a son has been born to Naomi. Why? Because this child is going to replace the ones that were taken from her. We read in chapter 1 that the Most High afflicted her. She went out full, she came back empty. But now she's filling up again. She has a grandson. According to the law, when a man died without a seed, his brother or the nearest of kin is supposed to go into his wife and bring up seed in that man's name, which means that the child that was gotten by Boaz and Ruth would be considered the son of Mahlon, the deceased. For this reason, it is said, a son has been born to Naomi. Mahlon was Naomi's son, and this child was seen as Mahlon's son, which means that he was seen as Naomi's grandson. A son has been born to Naomi. It is perfectly natural and expected that the people would rejoice with her. There's absolutely nothing in the context of this passage that suggests that Ruth lost the baby to Naomi. Furthermore, this passage does not suggest that Ruth must have been a non-Israelite, which means that Ruth is still an Israelite. In conclusion, a careful examination of the available evidence reveals that Ruth was in fact an ethnic Israelite, a bloodline descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who was born and raised in the land of Moab. As a citizen of Moab, she was rightly called a Moabitess, but that does not change the fact that she was an ethnic Israelite. Having said that, I am fully aware that for those Israelite men who want an excuse to go a-whoring after non-Israelite women, and for those Christians and Christianites who want the God of Israel to love and accept everyone, no amount of evidence will cause them to give up their false doctrine. And with that, I say, Shalom. And remember, if you find these teachings beneficial and would like to hear more, please like, share, and subscribe.